¿Por qué? ¿Por qué? No, no, no quiero más.
In the concealed corners of a modest Colombian town, a malevolent figure resided, shrouded in obscurity and moral decay. His true identity was obscured by a facade of ordinariness, yet the horrific acts he perpetrated would immortalize his name in the annals of history as one of the most notorious serial killers ever recorded. Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos was born on January 25, 1957, in Colombia. His early life showed no signs of the horrific actions he would later commit, leaving many to wonder what had triggered his darkness. Garavito Cubillos' troubled childhood laid the groundwork for his descent into darkness. Growing up in a conflict-ridden home with an authoritarian father, Garavito struggled to find solace. He faced ridicule and teasing at school, intensifying his feelings of inadequacy. As Garavito navigated adolescence, he became increasingly withdrawn, preferring solitude to social interactions. His fragile psyche continued to crumble, setting the stage for a reign of terror that would shake Colombian society. Garavito's sinister tendencies eventually surfaced, targeting vulnerable young men and boys and striking fear into the hearts of families across Colombia. In 1968, Garavito's father made the difficult decision to withdraw him from school due to financial hardship, forcing Garavito to prioritize his family's financial needs over his own educational pursuits. This sudden disruption to his academic life had a profound impact on Garavito, leading to feelings of resentment and anger towards his circumstances. The weight of responsibility, coupled with the loss of his educational aspirations, created a sense of hopelessness that would linger throughout his life. As a result, Garavito's relationships with his family members became increasingly strained, particularly with his father, whom he felt had unfairly burdened him with the family's financial woes. This pivotal moment in Garavito's life marked the beginning of a downward spiral, as he struggled to come to terms with his new reality and find a sense of purpose in a world that seemed determined to hold him back. A traumatic incident in 1969 during a vaccination appointment left a lasting impact on Garavito's mental state. His behavior became increasingly erratic, and his relationships with his siblings deteriorated. In 1971, Garavito's family relocated to Trujillo, but this fresh start was marred by difficulties. Garavito harbored a secret, and he was introduced to explicit content by a neighbor, leading to a traumatic experience. As Garavito navigated his teenage years, he sought refuge in alcohol, which intensified his existing issues. He was rejected by local women, deepening his sense of inadequacy. His behavior became increasingly disturbing, leading to his expulsion from his home and a brief detention in 1973. As Garavito entered adulthood, his life was marked by instability and failed relationships. He struggled to maintain employment and form meaningful connections, but managed to form platonic relationships with older women. Garavito's interactions with women were complex, balancing affection and turmoil. Despite his past, he showed kindness and devotion to the children of his partners. However, his gentle facade concealed a volatile temper, controlling behavior, and jealousy. As Garavito's relationships deteriorated, local scandals fueled gossip and speculation. His reputation as a troubled individual grew, casting a shadow over his personal life. His partners eventually evicted him, and his downward spiral continued unabated. The 1970s marked a transformative period in Garavito's life, characterized by intense turmoil and inner strife. His struggles with mental health issues, including psychosis, paranoia, and depression, began to manifest in disturbing ways. Garavito's personal life was marred by challenges, including feelings of inadequacy, depression, and suicidal thoughts. His relationships suffered, leading to a downward spiral of emotional pain and conflict. In 1978, Garavito began attending support meetings and found solace in the Pentecostal faith. He secured a new job and met his first girlfriend, Luis Mary. However, his family life remained complicated, and he became estranged from most of his relatives. A fresh start in Armenia brought new opportunities, but beneath the surface, a sinister reality lurked. Garavito's nocturnal activities hinted at a darker truth, and his life continued to deteriorate in the 1980s. In 1980, Garavito found work at a supermarket in Armenia, a development that initially appeared to provide a sense of hope. However, this newfound stability was fleeting, as he soon became entangled once more in the darker elements of his character. During his lunch breaks, Garavito frequently roamed the streets, targeting vulnerable individuals who happened to cross his path. As time had progressed, Garavito's behavior had grown increasingly unsettling, like a ticking time bomb waiting to unleash its fury. He had begun to engage in behavior that had caused harm to others, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Garavito's actions had been a disturbing exhibition of his moral decay, a chilling glimpse into the darkest recesses of his mind. Following these incidents, Garavito had frequently retreated to his quarters, where he had participated in a ritual of self-reflection. He had walked back and forth, striking his chest, while praying and inscribing names in a notebook. The air had been thick with tension, as Garavito had struggled to come to terms with his actions, his mind consumed by an unrelenting sense of guilt. As the shadows had enveloped him, Garavito had become increasingly fixated on the occult, delving deeper into the mysteries of the unknown. He had consumed literature on astrology, tarot, and spirituality, seeking answers to the questions that had plagued him. The lines between reality and madness had begun to blur, and Garavito had found himself trapped in a living nightmare. Garavito's spiral into turmoil had been further intensified by distorted thoughts, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. He had frequently endured vivid nightmares, awakening in panic as the recollections of his past had surged back. Yet, despite overwhelming guilt, Garavito had struggled to break free from the shackles of his own twisted desires. As Garavito's fascination with the occult had intensified, he had encountered Adolf Hitler's autobiography. The book had left an indelible mark on his psyche, leading to an infatuation that had soon escalated into obsession. He had begun to draw comparisons between their lives, highlighting the traumatic childhoods and periods of homelessness that had shaped them into the men they had become. Garavito's admiration for Hitler had quickly escalated into an all-consuming passion. He had developed a keen interest in certain historical events, later admitting to investigators that he had been captivated by the sheer scale of destruction. This unsettling fixation had ultimately foreshadowed the heinous acts that Garavito would soon perpetrate. On 25 January 1984, Garavito's mental condition had begun to deteriorate, his grip on reality tenuous at best. He had been hospitalized for 33 days, receiving medication and therapy in a desperate bid to salvage what was left of his shattered mind. After his release from the hospital, Garavito had escaped to Pereira, resuming his activities with renewed vigor. His actions had grown increasingly audacious, and he had soon become embroiled in a public scandal. The whispers of his sinister deeds had spread like wildfire, striking fear into the hearts of all who had crossed his path. At this stage, Garavito had already harmed numerous individuals, leaving behind a trail of trauma and anguish. His actions would eventually lead to his capture, as he had been briefly detained for theft. Yet, even as he had stood behind bars, Garavito's mind had continued to plot and scheme, his twisted desires burning brighter than ever before. Garavito's activities had escalated, leaving destruction in their wake. Between 1980 and 1992, numerous young individuals had been harmed, their lives forever changed by the encounter. Despite undergoing psychiatric treatment, Garavito's behavior had become increasingly alarming, a ticking time bomb waiting to unleash its fury upon the world. Garavito's fascination with the occult had intensified, leading him to experiment with the unknown. During one session, he asserted that he had entered a psychotic state, the boundaries between reality and madness blurring beyond recognition. On 1 October 1992, Garavito attempted a harmful act, targeting a young individual selling items on the street. The air had been electric with tension as Garavito's eyes had locked onto his prey, his mind consumed by an unrelenting hunger for destruction. And so, the dance of death had begun, a twisted waltz of violence and despair. Garavito's actions would soon ignite a firestorm of terror, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The question on everyone's mind had been, who would be his next victim? The close call seemed to have fueled Garavito's determination, setting the stage for a chilling sequence of events that would leave a trail of devastation in its wake. The darkness that had lurked within him had been growing, its presence threatening to consume everything in its path. Undeterred, Garavito struck again just 3 days later, taking the life of a 13-year-old boy. This act marked the onset of a killing spree that would leave Colombia in a state of shock. To avoid capture, Garavito employed various disguises, earning him a nickname among locals who remained unaware of his true identity. As Garavito's infamy grew, so did his collection of personal items from his victims. He meticulously documented his crimes by gathering various items, storing them in a suitcase. Notwithstanding his troubled disposition, Garavito's personal circumstances were characterized by chaos and instability. In June 1996, he lost his temporary employment, which compelled him to seek shelter. His girlfriend offered him temporary refuge. However, their relationship was plagued by Garavito's struggles with addiction and his volatile temperament. Following a confrontation, Garavito was expelled from the residence, forcing him to navigate life on his own. As time progressed, Garavito's conduct became increasingly unpredictable, leading locals to refer to him by a nickname. His difficulty in establishing meaningful connections, combined with a tendency for disputes, rendered him a solitary and alienated individual. Garavito's reign of terror finally came to an end, and he found himself wandering through Western Colombia as a destitute drifter. His criminal activities had escalated in audacity, and he yearned for an even greater level of infamy. Disenchanted with preying on minors, whom he deemed too easily manipulated, Garavito devised a far more nefarious scheme. He began to plan a mass crime intended to attract media attention and solidify his perverse legacy. His intention was to abduct several adults, subjecting them to harm before ultimately ending their lives. He imagined a climactic conclusion in which he would meet his own end amidst a whirlwind of chaos and devastation. However, destiny intervened. On 22nd April 1999, Garavito's dark aspirations were abruptly curtailed when he was apprehended by law enforcement for the attempted assault of a 12-year-old boy, a crime that would ultimately lead to his undoing. As he was taken into custody, the full scope of his atrocious acts began to emerge, leaving Colombia to confront the repercussions of his malevolent reign. Garavito's criminal activities escalated significantly, leading him to develop a sense of indifference towards his actions. This emotional detachment, however, was soon supplanted by an overwhelming surge of violent anger. On 4 October 1992, he encountered a 13-year-old boy near a bazaar where he had been drinking. Garavito pursued the boy, acquiring rope and a knife during the chase. He lured the boy with an offer of work, prompting him to leave the bustling area with Garavito. They proceeded to a secluded location where the boy was later discovered. Garavito claimed to have lost consciousness and was devastated to find evidence of his actions the following morning. This act signified the onset of a killing spree that would leave Colombia in a state of shock. On October 10, 1992, Garavito traveled to Trujillo, but his motives were far from benign. After consuming alcohol to suppress his urges, Garavito's rage re-emerged, leading to the harm of a 12-year-old boy. In 1993, Garavito's methods grew increasingly disturbing. He began to inflict severe harm on his victims, causing them immense suffering. 8 youths, aged 9 to 11, were lured from a local school to a nearby wooded area in the La Victoria district, where they met their tragic end. Garavito disposed of certain evidence, fearing that law enforcement might use it to trace his whereabouts. The remains of several children were found in the southeastern region of Bogotá. Subsequently, Garavito took the lives of 2 more children in the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 neighborhood before making his way to Tuluá. His violent campaign persisted without interruption as he moved through Pereira, Quimbaya, and Tuluá, leaving behind a path of devastation. Garavito's period of terror ultimately concluded in 1993 with the harm of a 13-year-old boy. Garavito's series of crimes persisted relentlessly, with his tactics growing more audacious. In 1994, he took the lives of 2 young boys. His criminal activities showed no indication of slowing down, as he went on to harm several more minors. Whilst the majority of his victims were male, he also harmed female victims. His later confession disclosed a staggering total of 200 crimes. In 1998, Garavito's campaign of violence extended into Ecuador, resulting in the tragic harm of 2 young boys. His distinctive Colombian accent and erratic conduct were notable during his time there. Investigation. Over the years, a troubling pattern began to surface in Colombia. Minors from disadvantaged backgrounds, often labeled as desecables or disposable, started to disappear from the streets at an alarming frequency. The ongoing civil conflict had fostered an environment of chaos and instability, rendering it improbable for these victims to be reported as missing. On 7 November 1998, a group of children playing football in Pereira made a grim discovery when they unearthed a skeleton. Although the authorities were initially sluggish in their response, they eventually took action on 15 November, when mass graves containing the remains of up to 36 children were found. The majority of the victims were boys, and their remains exhibited signs of binding and extensive harm. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that the crimes were not limited to a particular region. The heinous nature of the crimes led authorities to initially suspect the involvement of a satanic cult or an international child trafficking organization. However, the prosecutor's office soon concluded that the evidence indicated a single perpetrator, as nylon cords and bottle caps were consistently found at the crime scenes. The authorities were narrowing in on the suspect. On the 6th of February 1999, they discovered the bodies of 2 children positioned next to each other on a hill adjacent to a sugarcane field outside Palmyra. The following day, another child's body was located just a few meters away. All 3 victims had their hands bound, and their remains showed signs of harm and severe injuries. The evidence was located at the crime scene, accompanied by a significant piece of evidence: a partially unclothed man, later identified as Garavito, who had lost consciousness while intoxicated. He was still gripping a cigarette in his left hand, and the surrounding cane field had ignited, resulting in severe burns to Garavito. The authorities were narrowing their focus on the perpetrator, and a significant development occurred when they examined the glasses discovered at the crime scene. The lenses indicated that the assailant was a middle-aged individual who suffered from astigmatism in his left eye. Additionally, the footwear found at the location suggested that the suspect walked with a limp and was between 163 to 167 centimeters tall. The police acted promptly. However, they mistakenly apprehended an innocent man. Pedro Pablo Ramirez Garcia, a 44-year-old local individual with a limp in his right foot, was taken into custody. This arrest was primarily based on the testimony of a young boy who alleged that Garcia had acted inappropriately towards him. Nevertheless, as more children began to vanish in Bogotá, it became evident that Garcia was not the actual perpetrator. In the meantime, Detective Aldemar Duran was pursuing an alternative lead. He had started to suspect Luis Garavito, and his concerns were validated when Garavito's girlfriend was interviewed. She disclosed that she had not seen Garavito since December, but she provided the police with a black cloth suitcase that he had left with her. Inside the suitcase was a disturbing collection of items, including photographs of young boys, meticulous journals detailing his actions, and tally marks representing his victims. The police also discovered bills and other personal effects that directed them to Garavito's residence. Although the property was unoccupied, detectives speculated that Garavito was either away or searching for his next target. As law enforcement closed in on Garavito, they released Garcia from custody. Duran had successfully located Garavito's girlfriend and sister, tightening the investigation around the suspect. The authorities were on the verge of putting an end to Garavito's actions, yet the suspect remained at large, leaving the police anxious about when he might act again. Trial. The authorities were narrowing their focus on the perpetrator, and a significant development occurred when they examined the glasses discovered at the crime scene. The analysis of the lenses indicated that the assailant was a middle-aged individual who suffered from astigmatism in his left eye. Additionally, the footwear found at the location suggested that the suspect walked with a limp and had a height ranging from 163 to 167 centimeters. The police acted promptly. However, they mistakenly apprehended an innocent man. Pedro Pablo Ramirez Garcia, a 44-year-old local individual with a limp in his right foot, was taken into custody. This arrest was primarily based on the testimony of a young boy who alleged that Garcia had acted inappropriately towards him. Nevertheless, as more children began to vanish in Bogotá, it became evident that Garcia was not the actual perpetrator. In the meantime, Detective Aldemar Duran was pursuing an alternative lead. He had started to suspect Luis Garavito, and his concerns were validated when Garavito's girlfriend was interviewed. She disclosed that she had not seen Garavito since December, but she provided the police with a black cloth suitcase that he had left with her. Inside the suitcase was a disturbing collection of items, including photographs of young boys, meticulous journals detailing his actions, and tally marks representing his victims. DNA analysis established a connection between the genetic material discovered on the victims and that found in Garavito's cell. Faced with this evidence, Garavito admitted to harming numerous children during interrogation. He recounted that he would consume alcohol and seek out young boys, subjecting them to harm before ultimately taking their lives. The trial of Garavito became a highly publicized media spectacle, capturing the nation's attention as the details of his actions emerged. He was convicted on 138 of the 172 charges, with the remaining cases still pending. Garavito received a sentence of 1,853 years and 9 days in prison, marking the longest sentence in Colombian history. Nevertheless, due to legal stipulations in Colombia that capped prison terms at 40 years, his sentence was ultimately reduced to 22 years. Garavito's incarceration progressed as he was confined in a maximum security facility in Valledupar, Colombia. Given the gravity of his offenses, he was kept in isolation from other inmates due to concerns for his safety. Despite being imprisoned, Garavito maintained a sense of optimism regarding his future. He conveyed to Colombian Senator Carlos Moreno de Caro his aspirations to enter the Colombian Congress, become a Pentecostal pastor, and marry, with the aim of assisting vulnerable children upon his release. However, Garavito's health deteriorated considerably. He was afflicted with severe eye cancer and leukemia, which resulted in blindness, weakness, and fatigue. necessitating daily blood transfusions. Psychiatrists assessed Garavito and diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder, while also noting traits of narcissism. His psychological profile continued to attract attention as experts endeavored to comprehend the underlying motivations for his actions. As Garavito's life sentence approached a potential conclusion, the possibility of parole loomed in 2023. Nevertheless, in 2021, a judge denied his request for early release due to his failure to settle a fine owed to his victims. On December 12, 2023, Garavito passed away at a hospital in Valledupar at the age of 66. Conclusion. As we reflect on Garavito's life, we are reminded that every individual, no matter how flawed, is shaped by the complexities of their experiences. His story serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating consequences of neglect, abuse, and the failures of societal systems to provide necessary support and intervention. Garavito's narrative is a powerful testament to the enduring impact of childhood trauma and the urgent need for comprehensive support systems. It highlights the importance of addressing the root causes of violence and the need for collective responsibility in preventing such tragedies. Ultimately, Garavito's story challenges us to re-examine our assumptions about humanity, morality, and the complexities of the human experience. It invites us to engage in a deeper conversation about the social, economic, and cultural factors that contribute to the development of harmful behaviors. By exploring the intricacies of Garavito's life, we may uncover valuable lessons about the importance of empathy, compassion, and understanding in breaking the cycles of violence and harm. Thank you for watching. If you found this video thought-provoking, please consider subscribing for more content. Share with your friends and family to spark meaningful conversations. Your support means the world.